Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, in St. Lucia or in the diaspora. Welcome once again to Moving Forward on Choice TV. Tonight it will be somewhat different because I will try to take out the sting in what I say because I want to be more philosophical and somewhat more spiritual tonight. Some of you may not like the mood I portray. However, but it has always been part of my being from the time I used to go to church with a real lady who had no education per se, but common sense. That was my dear mother. God bless her soul. However, I don't believe that you have to be a Christian, Jew, Muslim, or any other religion to believe in the One Most High, or for us to have morals and values, and more so, integrity. So tonight, I will be going deeply into the human soul because of what we tolerated for 5 years under the last government. I do so because there are some who still refuse to open their eyes and hearts to what they were all about. Power, without a doubt, got to their heads. And I'm hoping that this present government will have learned from their inefficient management and does not allow this to happen under their leadership. I say this in all sincerity because if I thought that they were showing any signs of this happening by a few, then I would not hesitate to pull away from the Prime Minister, but those who show those characteristics. I believe sincerely that humility should be paramount in any leader or leaders. However, integrity, in my estimation, is the number one quality a leader should have. However, here is something I learned from listening to Professor Lumumba, and that is education is the equalizer because it is still true that the mind is the standard of the human being. He went on further to say, no matter how tall you are, if your mind do not work well, you are just a fool. No matter how short you are, if your mind does not work well, you are also just a short fool. But if you have a mind that works well, no matter how tall or short of a man or woman you are, you will be recognized and people will say, there goes a mind of a man or woman that speaks for itself. So tonight, my brothers and sisters, in the One Most High, I want to take this opportunity to be as humble as I can and to apologize to everyone I may have offended, some more so in my family and good friends, and even those I don't know. I therefore ask for your forgiveness. To those I have taken for granted in life, I also ask for forgiveness. Looking at what is happening in the world at present, more so in the war between Russia and Ukraine, Israel and the Muslim states, the recent and the aggressiveness of China to my second home, in my heart that is, Taiwan, and the killings we are seeing day in, day out in our Caribbean countries, and even what we have just seen in Haiti with the murders of 2 foreign missionaries who came to help morally and spiritually, have just left me bamboozled. I was left asking a simple question as to how man or woman can be so aggressive and violent towards each other. Then I thought of what I had learned many moons ago, that man or woman are like a whirling of electron, a disease on this planet not soon to be cured. But we can rise to new heights of brotherhood and kindness. Well, brothers and sisters, tonight I pray and hope that I can see it in my lifetime on this earth. Also, one of my concerns is the level of aggression in the war of words and animosity, even now in England, within the Conservative Party, since the general election was called. Yet, one would think that it is the time when party supporters come together to convince voters that they will represent the country better than before. Yet, that is not so, as there is an angriness in both parties. Lastly, what we are now seeing in the United States, with those who are paranoid with what is termed Trumpianism, must leave us baffled as to whether life is worth living or whether God must intervene to bring peace and tranquility to the world he created. Yes, it has given me food for thought. And our own opposition party in St. Lucia seems hell-bent on lies, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda at the highest level. Regrettable, I'm left with no other choice, as I'm compelled to look to the One Most High for guidance and to use the words that he used to us from the Bible, and also to what his son Jesus told us while he was on this earth. Ladies and gentlemen, he was quite succinct when he said to his disciples and followers that you must love one another as I have loved you. It also took me back to the Ten Commandments when it said again, quite succinctly, love thy neighbor as thyself. These two mean, to me, are profound words. And therefore, those who have no love for another and want to take another's life through producing a gun or a dangerous instrument or a weapon is simply not a godly person, but one who cannot bring themselves to love another. So tonight I say this in all sincerity, that if those who think that they can intimidate others so as to lead by aggression and violence when dealing with others, then the government of the day or those in charge must simply fight fire with fire. To an extent, we see this clearly on this little island of ours, where some people that can play their music as loud as they want, ride their motorcycles at the fastest speed that they can, more so around the Dame Paulette Road to Grand Riviere. During the week, I saw one car in the gutter. I just prayed and hoped that no one was killed, because one day a terrible accident will occur on that path of road, and many lives will be lost without a doubt. I therefore say to this government or any other that it is time we make people understand that they must have respect for one another's feelings. And if we are to have peace and tranquility in this country, our fathers and forefathers had some decency about them, but not only that, they loved and cared for their children and their neighbors. And did they not think that they could be allowed to do what they want, as some parents do today. And I think this can be seen clearly in the supermarkets where small children, 2 or 3 years, are allowed to run about without any care in the world. On Wednesday at Massey Mega, a child nearly ran into my trolley. Thank God I did have the hindsight to stop when I did. The parents did not stop the child because they simply continued running around. Least but not last, during the week, I was compelled to quickly stop my car in the middle of the road because a young cow decided to cross the road. Others had to also. How could this be right and fair? The owners or the owner of the cows should be fined, and not only that, should not be allowed to have cows tethered on the busy area like the around Massey Mega roundabout, where it is so busy. I therefore said to my government, let us be a government that cares for everyone, because a serious accident will occur with many lives lost. We need some discipline and love being practiced in this country. If not, it will be all hell will break loose. And therefore, something in the mode of operational restore confidence, in my view, that's my view, must return to this country. I firmly believe I'm firmly of the view that no one, essentially, no one is above the law. Trump found that out in America a few days ago. Even on our roads, where individuals think that they can drive with one hand, and then in the other, they have their phone, cannot be allowed to carry on. And further to that, the cows that I had to stop in the middle of the road for should now be taken in by government. These cows, as I have said, and I'm saying it again, as I've said before, can be seen sometimes close to rituals' doors. I'm not lying. In my book, there cannot be one law for the poor and one for the rich, or some. These cows must be picked up, and those perpetrating this blatant, unlawful act should be fined heavily, and the cows should be taken by the government. Let us sell cheap meat. Oh yes, we need meat. We need milk. We need to have cows to breed other cows for our survival and our children and children to come. But it needs to be done in a responsible manner, always respecting the rule of law at all times. So before I continue, I want to take this opportunity to say a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Oh, Father, we thank you and praise you for all you have done for this country of ours. You have thought it right that Philip Joseph Pierre should now be our leader and prime minister, because you saw the plight of the country under the leadership of the United Records of the Poor, more so with an incompetent leader. You therefore came to the realization that Philip was the best person to lead us out of bondage and on to the promised land, so to speak. Under the last government, their leader still thought that we were a colonial country, that which had a conscience. He therefore still continued to adopt their methods and practices in their period of government. There is no doubt in my mind that the period between 216 and 221 was run in a manner that took us back to colonialism, and many in that government seem to forget what our forefathers had fought for, only to throw it out of the window with the dirty bathwater. We therefore thank you, Lord, and we are indebted to you for your divine guidance in helping the country throw out that which was somewhat evil and brought us back to that which was good, to head the government of St. Lucia. You brought calm and you to this alien country. And therefore, Father, without a doubt, you are the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, and the Lords of Lords. Amen. Blessed is your name. And I'll take a break at this juncture. Welcome back to Moving Forward. Tonight, I want to quote from the Bible, chapter 51, verses 13 to 22. And it says, "When I was still young, before I started out on my travels, I boldly prayed for wisdom. I went to the temple and asked for her, and I will look for her as long as I have, from my blossoming youth to my ripe old age. She has been my delight. I have followed directly in her path ever since I was young. I received wisdom as soon as I began listening for her, and I have been rewarded with great knowledge. have always been a learner, and I'm grateful to everyone who has been my teacher. I was determined to live wisely and was devoted to the cause of goodness. I have no regrets. I fought for wisdom and was strict in my conduct. When I prayed, I sadly confessed how far short of wisdom I fell, but I was determined to have her, and I found her by keeping myself free from sin. I have grown in wisdom since first I found her, and I will never be without her because I was driven by the desire to find her. I have been richly rewarded. The Lord gave me a gift for words, and I have used it in His praise. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Before I begin in earnest tonight, let me make it clear and to put the facts on the table as to whom I am. I believe in the truth and nothing else. Lies seems to irritate me, and therefore those who follow my program must know that I'm not about party per se, but about proper representation to the community by those who aspire to. Therefore, I make it clear that I believe sincerely and dearly with some members of the unity government, such as the Prime Minister, the Minister of Infrastructure, Stephenson King, Minister of External Affairs, Alva Baptiste, who I will give all my support as the next Prime Minister should Philip leave the scene, as he is without a doubt the best to succeed Philip. When the time comes, again, I must point out that this is my personal view. There are others I will support, like the Minister in the Prime Minister's Office of Finance, Wayne Gerard. And on the fringe of my support is the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Prosper, and the Minister of Health and Education. These are the ministers and representatives of government I have my faith and trust in, and will do what it takes to help them get back into power. I do hope tonight that I have put my cards on the table in being fair, truthful, and to the point. However, I must say that at this juncture, I have no regard for anyone in the United Records of the Poor who are at present showing their faces or feces, so to speak, as the party representatives at the next general election. Not only that, I make it clear that as long as they are the present higher echelon of the party that exists, then I cannot support them in any meaningful way. It is clear to me that they are individuals who have failed us miserably. And not only that, they are, in my view, without a doubt, perfidious liars, because all they seem to be concerned about is to try to poison people's mind as to the good work that the unity government is doing. They have tried their best to stay in the goodness in the work that has been done to put the country back on its feet and back on course under the leadership of Philip Joseph Pierre, an astute and dignified leader. When one thinks of what we had before, who had no idea of leadership, not only his academic capacity seemed undeveloped for that role, they simply, in my opinion, manufactured lies, misinformation, disinformation, and seem to want to mislead the people at every twist and turn and at every opportunity they get. They sometimes jumble misinformation, and it's so blatant that even a child can see through it. Having said that, those in their party who still suffer from mental slavery will drink and absorb anything they throw at them, because there is that blocked minds of theirs that have been brainwashed to believe that they are mendicants, jackasses, barking dogs, even to the extent of brain. I didn't say it. It was said by their leader. Many, in my view, have difficulty in overcoming what they have been portrayed to be. They seem to have low self-esteem and simply to refuse to decolonize their minds. Least but not last, they simply fail to realize their potential. But the decolonization of the mind must take place long before that happens. As I've always said on this program, I don't intend to pull back any punches because I'm always about the truth. Because dishonesty plays no part in my life. Later in the program, I will bring much of this to light. During the period of the last government, there was a disdain that characterized so much of our then political debate. It was one of aggression and words like, "You can do what you want," to the Speaker of the House. There was simply no respect and understanding from those then in power. They allowed power to get to their heads. And it seems as though if you were not in their little clique or kissing their asses, then you were the enemy. No one outside that cabal was respected. And that is why they stuck to the FFF, family, friends, and foreigners, and those who were English, Chinese, or Indian. When Philip Joseph Pierre came into office, so much so that there was a sudden calm that spread across the country, from north to south, east to west. Ladies and gentlemen, there was nothing new in the politics that came to the fore under Philip Joseph Pierre. Why? Because he was honest. He had integrity. He was well qualified for the job. And above all, he was a humble individual. He learnt over the years. Therefore, the old system of what was there was replaced and refined with a politics of respect and responsibility for others. He was just truly being democratic, because what the last government became was the founders of exploitation of the weakest, and which devoted itself to the maximization of the country's wealth to the privileged few, which amounted to family, friends, and foreigners, as I said, of the Chinese or Indian makeup. A clear case in point, when I talk about the foreigners of the Chinese makeup, is because Alan and Guy seem to have forgotten that they were the ones who brought the firm Galaxy to this country of ours from St. Kitts, when at the time there were so many rumors flying around the world of alleged corruption by that firm. The question is simply, why was that done? In linking St. Lucia with alleged money launderers. They also conveniently forgot what they had agreed to build at Canals in that deal. More so, that accommodation was being built, and we can see it, for 1,000 Chinese or more to come to the country visa-free. This, in my view, was preposterous. And now their deputy leader is talking about CIP problems, that it is due to the present government and its general manager, Mr. MacLeod Emmanuel of CIP. Here is a fundamental question I would like to ask them as to who dropped the CIP levy from $200,000 to $100,000 or less. I can say quite categorically that it was certainly not the Philip J. Pierre administration. I would like one of the jackasses who wrote or write in the comments section to dispute that, or even further to that, those who have been talking about the so-called RICO case. What I'd like to know, when I see the higher echelon of the United Records of the Poor, who seem to be zooming in on something they began without a doubt. And therefore, my question is really simply this. Was that part of the DSH project deal? And the way many Chinese would be coming to St. Lucia visa-free, a cover-up in what was taking place in St. Kitts. What I would also further like to ascertain, once again, is which government dropped the CIP limit. Because I am sure that during Kenny's time, it was $200,000. And during the period of the United Records of the Poor, I'm sure that it went down to 100,000. Some have alleged that it was even lower. I don't know. Is that why the U.S. is anxious to find out? And because of that, the blame is now being directed at this government instead of the opposition, saying quite clearly and emphatically, to say quite clearly, and mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. That's what they should be saying. It is through their fault. Therefore, was this to entertain their friends from St. Kitts and Nevis? There are lots of other questions that I would love to ask. The other is, who is MSR Media? And I'd like to know with which party that they have strong links in St. Lucia, more so the Labour Party or the Unity Government. Because the Labour Unity Government has no dealings with him, as far as I know, from my research. And therefore, what has he got on our government or with those who work at CIP, more so Mr. MacLeod Emmanuel? In my view, there is simply nothing that this individual have on our government or Citizens by Investment Department or unit, because deals in no way was done with him. This guy, Philip Martinez is his name, ladies and gentlemen, in St. Lucia and in the diaspora, because no one deals with him or have done deals with him. As has been reported, this individual has a checkered past, let me say that quite clearly, and served a prison sentence for fraud conviction in the United States. He also had legal troubles in France and somehow linked himself to music to begin with in St. Kitts and Nevis. He does own a hotel in St. Kitts called OTI. I therefore say to the United Records of the Poor that if you are involved with this character, then I can categorically say to you that the Labour Unity Government is not involved with the character, and therefore this is a smear campaign. The question I'd like to ask is, who put him up to it? More so to drag St. Lucia into his orbit or ambit. These questions are relevant because the name of people like Mr. MacLeod Emmanuel is being tarnished when he knows nothing about what is going on. Quite possibly, he's not even aware of the individual concerned. Therefore, I said to the government, we must ask the special prosecutor or our legal team to look into this immediately. What upset me most is trying to link the general manager with what they left with, the maladministration that took place with the last government. They seem to be trying very hard to cover their past and track record in the dealings with the Citizens or a program, the CBI program. This general manager, in my view, is a straightforward individual. I know because he was one of my past students some years ago, and therefore he's above board. I will defend him even in America if it is necessary. I believe that this can be achieved, as it is now, by the opening up of political conversation and by the institutions of genuine political engagement, which will provide us with the facility to imagine the aspirations and fate of others. Ladies and gentlemen of St. Lucia, if we act boldly and decisively together under Philip Joseph Pierre, we can shape the new St. Lucia. Our people want, and that we owe to the future generations to come. As I mentioned last week, even though we live 100 years, it is only but a short time in this world of ours. If we can achieve the change that is needed, then it will show, without a doubt, that we will be somewhat humane. Humanity will flow in and around us like springtime, because we will not only have a just and humane country or society, but one that will be exciting, energetic, and enterprising. It will indeed be a St. Lucia for everyone, without whether rich or poor, old or young, disabled or fit. One where the sick will know that the medical establishment and facilities available will be there to make them better. That is what the present Prime Minister is working towards, or should be working towards. And I know that he's passionate about it. His aim and object is a determined one. And it is to deliver the kind of society the country wants and needs. He's virtually starting from scratch when it's clear for all to see that the last government left nothing behind in terms of money, because as they had made it clear to all concerned that the country was broke or it did not have any money. All Philip inherited was debt. That was simply grotesque. I therefore envisage that he has taken over with one purpose in mind, and that is to make St. Lucia great. And that is why we saw some prudence in the way he went about managing the country, monetary assets, when he first took over. He has done that admirably and satisfactorily, as his prudence and hard work is beginning to bring forth some light which had resided in the very far dark tunnel for over 5 long years. The opposition is doing their utmost to blacken his government with all the things they never did, and are somewhat shameful. It is somewhat shameful to see the amount of work that has been done within 3 years of this government's tenure. There is no doubt that the pace is beginning to accelerate, but it had to begin slowly but surely. I say this to everyone in St. Lucia. This is getting up my nose, and therefore they are so deep in their feces that they are continually spouting out, because they simply find it too hard to pull out, because it has now become like a drug in their veins. So it is at this juncture we'll be back, and we're coming back for more. Welcome back to Moving Forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you this. If I thought that the unity government was not doing anything towards the growth of the country, as far as the growth of the country was concerned, I would not hesitate to pull away from this government, because it would have become for me a soulless society, that I would not hesitate and would do so without batting an eyelid. There are some who are out there already complaining about the minimum wage, which is due to come into force on August the 1st. Many are simply forgetting that there are certain people earning $4 or $5 an hour. The $6.50 minimum is a beginning, because after all those years, we had nothing. However, as I've always said, that we must have a prices and incomes policy if the minimum wage is to work at the beginning. In my research, I have found out that in certain supermarkets and elsewhere, it is not an 8-hour day for some, it is a 9-hour day. Why? Because they have to sign in and out for lunch. That is an hour. And reclock in after their lunch break. That's 9 hours. That's 8 hours of work plus 9 hours. The firm concerns, or the firms involved concern, does not pay for the lunch hour. What has irritated me is the high echelon of the United Records of the Poor, who makes silly comments. In power for years, 5 years or more, They never spoke about the minimum wage or did anything about it. Yet today, the deputy leader is an expert on the subject. Yet he has failed to express that view when he was in office. Yes, I believe that the government must make every effort to bring up the amount to $8.50 an hour, but I continue to say that Rome was never built in a day. My insistence on prices and incomes policy is that the businesses, more so big supermarkets, will quickly put up their prices and will use the minimum wage as an excuse to inflate their prices. Therefore, the government has to try to overcome this. When I made some research, I found out that some supermarkets were given wages of 10 to 15 cents an hour increases, that is. This, in my view, is a damn insult and must never be tolerated in any country, more so this one. Yet for 5 years under the last government, this nonsense was continuing. Another absurdity, in my view, that the government has to look into seriously is the amount of money that fathers give to mothers of children they don't live with. Oh, how in heaven's name can a man give a lady $200 a month for a child in this day and age? Not only that, I want to put to the government and St. Lucians on the whole that this amount came into force, for those who don't know, in 1981. And we are now in 2024. And it has simply not changed. How can that be? When we talk about crime and conflict that seem to be rising so quickly, then we have to look at areas like these. Standards must rise in our education, in our homes, on the roads, on our playgrounds. And we must look back at our culture and how and the way we lived, which was then exciting and worthwhile being on this earth. Discipline must return to every possible avenue of our lives. I could not end by not thanking the good Lord for something worthwhile. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the Almighty for sending us some rain, would you believe it, last week, because the country needed it, as it was without a doubt showers of blessings, which we should all be pleased about. Therefore, this brings into focus the water shortage that has been taking place, because the dam cannot take much water because of the silt that has stopped the Roseau Dam as being a reliable source of water supply in the Castries Basin area and the north. The borrowing began at $43 million to desill that dam, EC, and went on to $60 million. Now to the crux of this matter. When the last government borrowed a huge sum of money, in order to desill the dam, what we are now finding out is that very little was done. I'm not making that up, as the facts are there to see. Let me make it clear that I'm not saying things that are untrue. When the Prime Minister of the country took the loans then, he made it clear that the desiltation would take about a year. That was a concocted lie of all time. We even paid something in the region of over $650,000 for a barge, which was simply allowed to decay and given away, and was only used once or twice. That, in my view, was sheer incompetence. What was scary about that deal, and many firmly believe that there was, or probably alleged corruption on a huge scale, because the minister, Ezekiel, said quite categorically that the desilting of the dam would take 8 years if the weather holds out and we do not have a hurricane like Thomas. Therefore, what I would like to ask is why a past prime minister and minister is giving us totally two different stories and time frames as far as the desilting was concerned. Was this project not discussed in cabinet? Were they not all agreed on that project in that cabinet? We simply cannot accept the sheer incompetence and alleged corruption that has taken place. I want to point out that when the discussions were taking place in 2016, during Mr. Augustine's time as the general manager of Wasco, it was pointed out by the German contractor that the dam would have to be closed in order to desilt. This was like a shock in the room because those involved from overseas did not realize that the consequences that this would have, as it was the only dam that supplied water to many areas of the country. What was said then was that this would have to be like an open heart surgery, trying to give water and at the same time dredging the dam. It is necessary to point out that the consultancy report was paid for by Germany, not by our government. What I found out is that the dredging equipment would be the property of Wasco. When one thinks of it, a huge inquiry needs to take place, and some ministers and prime ministers or prime minister then have to answer for what took place, because the dam is getting even worse at present with the accumulation of silt that is taking place. St. Lucians may not be aware that if this hurricane season is a bad one as predicted, then our water supply across this part of the country will be minimal or not at all. Therefore, the country must be made aware of this. And now this government has the burden of finding the money to do some quick work on the dam because of the situation that we are now thrust in. What grieves me is basically, why is the special prosecutor, why is he taking so long to come out with something on issues like this and many others which he should be investigating? Is therefore a form of incompetence, as far as I'm concerned, on the part of these individuals who seem to be taking the time, a long time, because they think that they are in Sin City. Therefore, it does not matter. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are seeing in the United Records of the Poor at present is political fragmentation and discord, because they seem at a loss to explain their mismanagement of the country over 5 years. Those who believe in slavery, colonialism, seem to have thought that they were superior human beings and therefore did not have to love someone that was not of their color or wealth or even intellectual ambit. What they simply did not take in, their septic mind, is that a fool is always a fool, regardless whether they are fair complexion or tall or short individuals. This is fundamental for those who support individuals of that ilk, must come to realize. I will always remind St. Lucians that one of our best ministers of education was J.M.D. Bousquet. Yet he did not have a degree, master's, or doctorate, etc. But he was certainly not a fool. He had the great gift that came from the One Most High. And that was common sense. Not only that, he listened before taking action or making a decision. Not the big heads we have had over the years in that position. I simply pulled back, no punches. I firmly believe that any political party or community that claims to be liberal, tolerant, and humane, especially when we take in the Fortuna Doctrine, which tells me that they are without a doubt not a government of the people, but one for their family, friends, and even foreigners. There is no doubt that helping the poor was not part and parcel of their culture. And that doctrine told us so clearly, unless we were simply ass lickers. These individuals seem to have made it clear that they were simply not interested in the human rights of the poor, the sick, the old, the disabled in our midst. Yet these characters have the guts to seek out the throne of their alleged corruption, to make it look as if this government of Philip Joseph Pierre is the one to watch in terms of mismanagement. I therefore hope and pray that because of Philip's family background, he will reinvigorate what is good in the society that existed many years ago, where people literally cared for each other, whether they were family or not. The community was their family because many worked and prayed together. As I've mentioned last week about what the so-called deputy leader of the opposition had to say about that $1 million for farmers having boxes for bananas compared to the $6 million being spent for cricket by this government, he simply forgot that his leader, when he was Minister of Tourism, paid millions for boxing in paradise. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. That was without a doubt a flop. This is West Indies cricket, where the government will get something back. He also seemed to forget that the 7.3 million that his leader and Prime Minister paid for vaccines, we never received. What concerns me is the way it was done. In my view, the transaction which took place then was totally against the rules and regulations of the Treasury. The Prime Minister then, it is alleged, cut corners at every opportunity to get that money. This, in my view, should have been in the public domain for an inquiry. Therefore, government must move fast to have that inquiry. We cannot afford to sit back until cocks have teeth in order that the facts on that transactions or those transactions come to light. I also want to know from the deputy leader, where are our CIP funds that your so-called DSH foreign direct investors have put our CIP money in? Because it is certainly not the lockbox or the consolidated fund. Is it in his personal account? I would like to know. So would all St. Lucians. While I'm at it, two things I would want to know also immediately is why the garbage site in View Fort was removed and closed so that a $13 million road was built. And also, at whose cost was it? The country or the foreign direct investor? We were told that he would put in his money, but we have not seen any proof of that. Further to that, I would like to know who tended to the moving of the garbage from that site to Dayglow. I've asked these questions before, but no answers have been forthcoming. And therefore, St. Lucians and countrymen and women, you now have to insist that answers are given to you and done quickly. Is here. I'll take another break and before we end. Welcome back to Moving Forward, and we are on our last leg. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a government for 5 years or more, and yet to date it is very difficult to understand or to know how money in this country was spent? Not only that, what was done with whatever they spent? There must be an in-depth inquiry, and no one can see that they are doing all in their power to give, that's what they are doing right now, to give the impression that they are not guilty of anything but this government. Yet, if that was so, why then, even before COVID, that they made it clear that the country was broke? Have they forgotten that? And therefore, anyone with a little bit of common sense should be asking themselves a simple question. Why were they broke when the then Prime Minister said that it would take him 2 years to reshape the country to one that will be one of the best in the Caribbean? Another question, did he not tell us that the apple of his eye, T.O.R. King, would build so many small islands like areas in Dubai have at present? Yet we did not see the beginning of one. It was without a doubt sheer pie in the sky and poppycock. Total lies, mismanagement, and above all alleged dishonesty at the highest level. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not just saying so. The facts are there to prove all what I am saying. If you open your eyes to what is termed reality, you will see it. This last government was without a doubt an inefficient government, and if I had to grade them from 100, I would give Alan and his bunch of merry men and women 5. And that would be generous. How can anyone compare what Philip Joseph Pierre has achieved in less than 3 years compared to what the last Prime Minister did in over 5 years? One seemed to be that the Prime Minister, that is in cloud cuckoo land, and the other, Philip, was in the real world. What is so obvious is that Alan was more concerned with those who had money, maybe. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to show me any meaningful legislation or laws that were passed under the last government. Name it, I'd like to hear it. For them, it was easier to tear down than to build. The facts are there to see. I simply cannot see anything that the last government and their leader has done in their 5 years that stick in my mind, where I feel satisfied that the country as a whole benefited. Tonight, I'd like to say a lot more, but time is running out. However, I want to point out to all, more so to politicians, that the rule of law must always prevail. This was brought forward to us recently in America, that we have been taught at what says clearly, truth must always be on the throne. The conviction of Trump on 34 counts as a felon and villain must reverberate in all democracies of the world, because the system of what is right and what is unlawful prevailed. It was done in a manner that punishes the offenders and acquits those innocent. In this case, it was the ex-president of the United States of America. I hope and pray that our special prosecutor will take this into consideration and hurry up the process, more so in a small country like ours. I simply have no regard for those who think that they are above the law. If we want to live in a decent society, then we must have respect for each other and also observe the laws that are there to protect everyone, more so the weak and vulnerable in our society. Once again, I've tried to be honest. Because when you are, your eyes are always open to being or to having a decent community and individuals. We must also confront the truth, regardless how unpleasant it can be sometimes. We have to expose and face it if we are to achieve a better quality of life for everyone, more so for those to come, our children and their children. So my fellow countrymen and women, Go in peace to serve the one Most High. As always, I beg of you to never forget that you were born black, and therefore you should be proud of that. Go in peace in the one Most High. And say once again, I say once again to you, fellows, ladies and gentlemen, good night and good night. And may God bless you all. Good night.